Catherine Skovic with the Anglican Consultative Council. And I had been sitting in a working group 1, so it was interesting to move to working group 2 in ECOSOC. The group started at, negotiations started at 10:25, and we started with pre-17, which is on the key role of national governments and legislative bodies to promote SD. The U.S. said they were flexible on the placement, and they also define relevant information as information that is connected to the 3 pillars of development based on environmental monitoring and assessment and is integrated with social and economic data. Canada wanted to replace local authorities with such, so it would be such authorities. G77 couldn't agree with the U.S. language, and they said that the issue depends on each country. Russia said it's better to affirm all levels of agreement, because at G77 they had a problem with EU suggestion of all levels, because if you say national, you don't have to say all levels, because national would include all levels. And the EU said, no, that's not exactly correct, because for us, we're made up of 27, soon to be 28 countries. So we cannot say national, we have to include all levels of government, and Switzerland agreed because that situation also applies to them. So then the chair said, can we go along with relevant info as applicable in the 3 pillars of SD and all levels of government? G77 said yes. But then the EU said, and we would prefer to use 3 dimensions rather than 3 pillars, because pillars are vertical and they seem to indicate separation. So the the EU wants to come back to dimensions. And Switzerland definitely supported EU's suggestion to have all levels of government as opposed to national. And it was very interesting. Lichtenstein said, what happened to our proposal on the judiciary? We had a paragraph on the judiciary. Where is it? And the chair said it's coming up. And in actuality, there's 1 word in the next paragraph, including judiciary. So to me that, well, I'm not going to comment, yes. Okay, the next one was NCST 17, broad public participation and access to information. Mexico wanted to add volunteer groups. Holy See wanted to add migrants. G77 said add the Rio principles with principle 10. Chair said, I'm disappointed to hear this because we're going backwards. ROK said, and add other stakeholders. And the U.S. wanted to delete what G77 added about Rio principles. The U.S. likes the original text and says that the participation of civil society depends upon strengthening the rights of access to information. Next was CS18, role of civil society. G77 said delete, address role of civil society later, and the NGOs, so deleted here. US said we have to keep the last 3 sentences and add legitimate to information. Mexico gave a very strong statement and said we have to keep the second sentence, it's very important to us. And I thought it was rather interesting because Mexico also said, for countries that talk a lot about transparency and participation, I'm surprised to hear this viewpoint coming from them. And it was a rather strong statement. And Switzerland thanked Mexico for this comment, and Norway agreed. And the Holy See also supported Mexico's statement. And the UE said, we're very concerned that there has been the removal of the statement, the right of assembly, that has been removed from this paragraph. So that was a concern to the EU. And it is, I'm not going to editorialize. Okay. Pre-18 BIS, ICTs, information communication technology, to reinforce, convey, and integrate the 3 pillars of sustainable development. The EU and G77 questioned the placement and said it might be better in the section on technology. And the US said that they thought it was important to have it here for all stakeholders and major groups because we need to have information. So it was kept in but bracketed. Okay, 18 bis, the vital role of women. And of course, you know what the Holy See said. Instead of gender, we should have equality between women and men. And the chair said, every time this comes up, you always say that. And the US said gender equality is an accepted term and a very important issue. Switzerland, Norway, Liechtenstein, Australia, Canada, and Iceland agreed. The G77 said delete. And the G77 also wanted to change the leadership of women, and Liechtenstein said, well, if you change the leadership of women, in the first sentence we want to add, women are powerful agents of change. Because they didn't want, we don't want to water down this sentence on women. So the G77 agreed to keep leadership, but stopped at decision making. They didn't want that first sentence that Liechtenstein proposed. So in spite of so many people supporting keep gender equality in, the Holy See still wanted to bracket it. And the chair came back and said, well, listen, how about in this one section we keep it? You can work on it in other sections. The Holy See agreed to take the brackets off. Yes. So this is an agreed upon paragraph, no brackets. Okay. 19, sustainable development, public and private sectors. G77 said this is addressed in other paragraphs, 20 and 20 bis. G77 said bracket, legitimately available knowledge. US said to retain it. Chair, two paragraphs are identical, delete 20 bis, so they said okay. So 21 bis, participation of young people, youth, and children. And there was an interesting discussion that went on here. I won't go into all of it. G77 said add generations that follow. And Norway said, after youth and children, add both girls and boys. And the chair tried to get some resolution on this, and do you have support? Does anyone else support Norway on this? Australia said, the paragraph we added on indigenous people has been lost. And where is it? The chair said it's coming up later. G77 said no to both girls and boys. EU proposed to add both girls and boys after, in another section of another sentence of the paragraph. And Norway thanked EU. And the chair kept trying to go back to Norway and said, do you want to drop this? Because they didn't seem to be getting much support for including both girls and boys. They were kind of hanging out to dry there by themselves. Finally, Australia said, girls and boys are not treated the same in all societies. And I think it's important to keep it in there. And Norway wouldn't budge, and they kept it in there, even though there seemed to be pressure from the chair to keep it in. So Norway really wanted it in there. Okay, 21 ter. Workers and trade unions, social dimension. EU liked the chair's text, just delete the middle sentence. The EU said that they should retain that, and it's important to keep this because of the role of trade unions and workers. So the EU wanted to keep it in. G77 said, we don't know if trade unions are linked to the social dimension in all countries. So they weren't too sure about that. Okay. CST 21, farmers, fishers, and pastoralists. G77 wanted to take out land degradation and desertification because he said that's listing. And they said, if you want a list, I'll come back tomorrow with a list of 20 other things to add in here. And the chair said, no more text. Okay, so the EU said we need to retain land degradation and desertification. And Australia said, we are very pleased that farmers are one of the major groups, and not all agricultural processes are helpful to the land, and we should add if helpful, if you go back and look at that word, and everybody agreed to that. Okay, I'm almost done. And I'm sorry to take so long. ST21, NGOs, terrible. As Alyssa beautifully commented in her follow-up statement, eliminate the sharing of info. US, keep the original paragraph. US and EU said delete the middle part. NST 21 about information sharing implementation of ST. EU and G77 made 2 small additions. It was agreed upon paragraph. Australia again said, where is the paragraph on indigenous peoples? Chair said this is coming up, don't worry. Okay, last page. NST 21 sex on UN system. G77 wanted to add and its system, UN and its system, and nobody thought that that was agreed language. So they had to go back and check. And yes, the UN system is the agreed language, not and its system. And G77 also wanted to add IFIs, and United States said, no, that's not appropriate here. So then they went into a big discussion on that, and if the IFIs should be included here. Okay, so then the G77 used this as a bargaining chip. And they said that they would keep the IFIs if, what was the other thing they wanted? If they would keep the other part of the thing that they wanted, the accepted language on UN systems. So they were using it as a bargaining chip. So then we took a break because the chair was ready to go to section 4, but G77 needed more time until 5. We come back at 5, they still weren't ready. So we had the reports and we were dismissed early, the reports from the major groups.
Thank you very much. May I make a small complementation to your, because I think you skipped paragraph 20, which was the one on science and technology.
Oh, wow.
And there was reasonable agreement, but again, they had this very interesting, or not interesting, new wording on legitimately acquired information.
Right.
Which I commented on my statement, which I think is a proviso that I don't understand why it's there. And interestingly enough, in this paragraph, nobody commented. So it's not in brackets, it's there. So I think this is something, well, worrying in some ways, although the paragraph is a good one. I mean,
By the way,
it recognizes science and technology and so on.
the US voted to retain that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
But maybe just on the early C, we find it, of course, as a women's major group, quite problematic that we have a group like that, which is not a country,
Yeah.
who only represents men in a way, is speaking on issues for women. And I mean, there is apparently a group in the US called, I think, Catalyst for Change, so we have a campaign since many years to try and get this observer status away. They say you should not, mix the two, religion and government. So, I mean, this is an issue we just want to highlight, that we are very critical about this position. And I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood could also have a seat here, right?
Yeah.
And so I also don't think that they can take, I mean, you said it was very nice that they agreed. No, it's not nice that they agreed. They have no really.
I don't mean nice, it was unusual. It was a surprise.
Who's not a member state.